Welcome to everybody that has joined the webinar session this morning. We have quite a bit to cover over the next hour, so we're going to keep it pretty fast as we go through the session. The two presenters that will present today is myself, Anton. I am the president of DATASCOPE. I'm based in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then we have Stephen. Stephen is our chief software architect. He's based in South Africa. And the subject of what we're going to present to you today is the customization or tailorization functions within the DATASCOPE software. These are essentially functions that we built into the software that allow you or a developer that works for you or your DSP, your partner, to actually write very specific tailored code, software code, to customize your particular install or solution. So I'll touch on that in a second or two. Just any questions that you have, you can post them. We do have a section at the end, provided we have enough time to address some of those questions at least. So please go ahead with any questions as you see fit. Right, so just in terms of the agenda, it is going to be a little bit technical. We are not intending to sit here and explain to you how to write scripts or coding, but rather to explain the different tools and what those tools do. But there will be a little bit of Stephen actually demonstrating some coding, showing you how to apply some coding in various places, etc. So we'll be a little bit technical in the session. We're going to cover the various aspects of the customization tools. These tools form a grouping called Selective Architecture. So that's what we call it, Selective Architecture. And it covers VB scripting, triggers, data extraction, plugins, business objects, and HTML5. And we'll cover each of those in the session. Right, let's go on. So just briefly, just to position where selective architecture comes in, what we have seen over the years is as we've implemented the DATASCOPE software into larger and larger distribution and manufacturing intensive businesses, what we've seen is that there's a need to integrate the software with other third-party software or hardware, right? So here's just some examples just to position where we fit here. One at the top right-hand, there's a pick-to-light system. Let's say you're running the DATASCOPE software, and in one of your fine-picking areas, you want to install a pick-to-light system in there. You would typically use this architecture to do the integration between DATASCOPE and the pick-to-light. So just very broadly speaking, you can assign a picking slip to a picker. Let's say his name is Johnny. And when Johnny walks up to the pick-to-light system, he could scan his ID card. The pick-to-light system would integrate to us through the data extraction layer, would pull down everything that needs to be picked by Johnny. And then immediately the pick-to-light system would take over, process the picking with Johnny. And when he completes his pick at the end of the rack, the pick-to-light system would then post that back through a business object as a normal pick, right? So if you took his scanner and you refreshed his scanner at the end of that pick-to-light, his scanner would say you've picked all of these items. So that's typically where we do some integration. But it would be some other examples, just briefly, would be if you put some conveyor systems in, maybe some sorting systems, you want to sort orders in a certain way. Perhaps you want to do integrate a scale, a weigh scale into various processes. You'd use the plugin there to integrate the scale to the software. VLM machines, what's happening more and more in warehouses today, and we're seeing it everywhere, is a increased focus, particularly on large distribution centers for autonomous robots. So if you go to any of the large logistics conferences, now you'll see a lot of robots there, robotics, where companies are putting in a robot to move inventory from place to place. Again, that would require some sort of integration. And we already have those layers in place to allow you or a third party working with you to actually develop those integrations fairly simply and easily. So we're going to try and demonstrate some of those to you today, give you a bit of a flavor for them. This webinar will be recorded. or is being recorded and will be put onto our site afterwards, so that you will be able to go and get it afterwards to go through it in a bit more detail. Right.
Okay, so the first one we're going to touch on is VB scripting. So how we're going to do these is I'm going to do a short demo, and then Anton will give you some additional information on them after each of the demos. So the first one we're going to jump into is VB scripting. So I'm going to hop over to the software. So basically just to position VB scripting where it fits in. Typically it's used within the PC client, and it's used to customize existing screens where you need to add in small pieces of logic, for example, message boxes, or do some logic around buttons or text boxes. So to demonstrate this, what I'm going to do is use the job receipt application. And the example I'm going to give you here is simply allow us to print multiple product labels for a particular job receipt. So based on the pan size. So in other words, if we have a pan size of 5 and we receipt 15 units, we want to print, say, 3 box labels, one for each of the boxes on the pallet. So typically the product label is a system setting driven. So that's, you can only set it to 1 or 2 or 3. So in this case, we're going to customize that and make it a bit different. So what I'll do is I'm going to right click on the text box here, the quantity text box, and go into the VB scripting. Once you're in there, we just need to select the event we want to hook into, which in this case is the loss focus. So as soon as they move off the quantity field, and then we click add code, gives us a little template. What I've got here is just some samples. So I'm going to stick a sample VB script in there. And all this is going to do is, based on the pan size, is going to update that field. So I'm going to save that. Close the screen. I just need to reload it so it can reload the scripting. Okay, so now if I put in a job number and we put in a quantity of, say, 10, it will update the field on the screen. So it allows us to first of all, not only change the data on the screen, so push data back into the screen, we can also change how the field looks. So there's a lot of logic that can be applied there. And these VB scripts can obviously be applied to buttons, to text boxes, a number of the components. And they also apply to pretty much all the screens within the software now. You can pick them out by this little icon in the bottom left that indicates if the screen has been converted. But typically at the moment, I think pretty much all of the PC-based screens have been converted over already. So Anton, you want to just touch on some examples?
Cool, thanks, Stephen. So just to give you some other examples of where this would apply. So these are some that we've done recently for clients, or our partners have done for clients. One of those is, let's say you're doing a job receipt and the product that you're receiving is a lot traceable product and it's expiry date controlled. One of the ones that we've done recently is a VB script in that screen that essentially waits for you to put the lot number in. Immediately putting the lot number in, the VB script runs. It goes and has a look at the components that were issued to that job, finds the component that has the first expiry date to expire, and then sets the job's expiry date to that same date. So essentially, if I had one component that is going to expire in 8 months' time, then the job above it would obviously immediately default to an expiry date of 8 months' time. That's a typical example of something like that. Another one might be during the PO receiving process. Let's say I've created a custom form field on certain stock codes that says this product needs some special inspection. It's not your normal inspection, it's something special that needs to happen. You may very well put a little VB script onto the PO receiving screen, and every time you post that PO receiving screen or allocate out the pallets, that VB script runs in the background, checks to see, is this one of these products that's got the special inspection? If it does, pop up a little warning to the user to say, right, this requires the special inspection, please print an additional label for it, or something like that. Okay. Another option would be, we have a client at the moment that does not want to issue more than one lot number into their production jobs, right? So in a work in progress job, I have multiple components. Some of those components are lot traceable, and they want to limit the amount of times that they take any one of those components and give it more than one lot number. So the reservation rule could actually do it. They don't want the reservation rule to do that. The reservation rule at the moment will will reserve based on their current logic. All they really want, though, is that when they're doing the job release, before they finalize the release of that into a pixlip, they want a VB script to go and double check and say if any component has now been reserved across more than one lot. If they have, pop up a little pop-up message that says this component is reserved against more than one lot, which then allows the user to kind of cancel the release of the picking slip and go in and manually edit the reservations to whatever they would prefer. Another one would be, typical example, we have settings that allow you to over-receipt a purchase order. If that's turned on, you may want to put a VB script onto that screen that says whenever you over-receipt a purchase order, well, it would run every time you receipt a purchase order, but it would check to see if you're over-receiving. If you are over-receiving a purchase order, it would drop an email to someone or a list of people or something like that. So those are some of the examples. It's really, it's important to understand that this is very wide open. You can pretty much do anything with these things. It just needs a little bit of creativity to come up with different ideas here.
Okay. So the next element we're going to have a look at is triggers. So I'm going to hop straight back into the software quickly. So just to position triggers, they fit in pretty much in the back end of the system. So you can see them as events that get raised on the server side. So when someone does a specific transaction, like a purchase order receipt, an event is raised, and you can hook into those events using triggers. We can also do it on picking slip, status update, anywhere there's a transaction happening and there's something happening in the system that you want to hook into. So how they work is they have a backend element that we need to configure. Let's close that. So there's a folder on the WMS server within our web API called triggers. And inside here, there's a little README file. And in here, it lists out, first of all, how triggers work and how to configure them, and then also lists a number of the triggers that are available in the system. And it gives you the name of the trigger as well as the parameters that are passed to that trigger. So what we're going to do in this case, in my example, is we're going to set up a notification to our customers when we release their order down to the floor to be picked. In other words, when a picking slip moves to a printed status. So what I'm going to use here is the picking slip status update. And all we need to do inside this folder is create a new file, just a text file. And I'm going to rename that to the name I just copied. So that's a little VBS file. And then I'm going to grab some script here. And what this script is going to do, again, it's VB script, except it's sitting on the server side this time. What it's going to do is it's going to compile a short email and send it through. So let's do that. So we edit the VB file, stick my script in there, and save that. These scripts are called asynchronously. In other words, they do not halt the system. So the system doesn't wait for these triggers to fire. The event is raised and the software will continue. So if someone makes an error in these scripts or messes it up, there's no way it's going to impact the performance of the system. So we just do that. And what I'm going to do now in the product is release a picking slip here. Oh, screen. So I'm just going to reserve an order quickly. Just a one-line order. Reserve that and confirm it into a picking slip. And then let's go to the picking slip 1100. If I shoot across to my Outlook here, I should get an email shortly. So in my email here, it sends a simple notification saying your order's been released essentially into the warehouse. And then you can, I didn't show you the detail of it, but there's a number of the parameters being passed through to that trigger can be used to go and fetch things like the customer purchase order number, the order number, and the picking slip. Okay. And similarly, you can use this when they cancel the picking slip. You could notify the customer that their order's been cancelled for whatever reason. Okay, over to you, Anton.
Thanks. So some other areas where triggers would apply. Let's say I have a website where people place orders on the website, and those orders are processed into our distribution center. You may very well use triggers to every time the pick slip changes status. So once it's released, once it's started, once it's picked, once it's checked, once it's been through the shipping area and once it's dispatched, you may use that trigger to pass updates back to that website fairly easily, so that the user can come into the website and obviously see exactly how far his order is right through your distribution center. Another one would be, and we've done this recently with one of our partners, quite a number of the sites in North America run Catechus for their EDI, also known as Syspro Shipping. We created the interface layer that every time you create an invoice or a dispatch note, the trigger fires. The trigger fires an external program written by one of the partners. That program basically takes that dispatch note as an example, reads our tables, builds up all the XML, puts it into the EDI XML format, calls the Syspro shipping business object, posts the shipping business object, which then obviously delivers it to the customer. So we use the trigger just to kick that process off. Auto force a cycle count. So we're doing this at one site at the moment. During the picking process, there are times where a picker will skip a pick. So we ask him to pick 50 units of a product. He gets to the bin, and for whatever reason that those 50 products are not there, so he clicks the skip button. In the background, a trigger fires to say, well, this event was that we skipped a pick, and that runs a little piece of software which essentially calls a business object and writes a cycle count into the cycle count schedule to say somebody better go and cycle count that bin. So automated in the background. So it just gives you a few examples. Again, there's multiple examples here. We're just giving you a few to give context.
Righto. Okay, the next one we're going to touch on is data extraction. So I'm going to hop over to the software here. Basically, where data extraction fits in, it's used to essentially pull customized data from the system. And where we've used it a lot is in the logistics service providers, providing them with information from the system. In the past, we used to write services that passed information to them. But with this new module, we allow you to pull that data and to customize that as they need. So how it's set up is, if we go into the system setup here, there's a section here called data extraction. And what I've done here is I've set up two examples, one for FedEx and one for USPS. And in the setup of this, it's very simple. We give it a name, description, and then also we can configure a custom query inside here with a number of parameters. So this is typically where you put in your data extraction query. And then once it's configured, it allocates a token number, which you can then provide to the third party, whoever it is, and they can then fetch the data from the system. And how that works is there's a service that runs on an AWS server, and you can make calls to that service using an HTTP request, and then the service will respond to you in what's called JSON. And typically then you can consume that information and use it however is needed. So just to show you these two examples here, if I go and grab got a couple of links here just to show you. I've got the service running in the background. These are those two data extracts I've got set up. So we stick this into the browser here. What you'll see is the URL that I've put in there is basically the server along with the port, and then basically the company we're pulling it from, the token code, and then any parameters. And once you put that information in, the system will go and run the query in the background. There's checks and balances in place that guys can't do funny things. And then the data is formatted into JSON and returned. And typically this can be used in any application or any type of place that you need to pull data from the system. And you can configure it relatively quickly with just having some SQL skills. The whole interface is built there already for you. Okay, Anton, we put some examples where this is used.
Yeah, so let's give some examples here. Site in South Africa have quite a number of VLM machines, vertical high lift storage units. So they look like a huge big cupboard. Basically, inside there's a whole lot of drawers, and on every drawer level, there's a lot of bin locations inside that drawer. And essentially what would normally happen is a picker would walk up to the machine to pick some product out of that VLM, and he would have to enter in the drawer number to get the machine to bring the drawer down to him and then pick the product out and then enter the next drawer number and so on. So what we did there is simple customization on the VLM software that asks the user to scan his ID code when he gets there. So what would happen is a normal pick slip gets released, gets allocated to a picker. Let's say his name is Peter. Peter comes walking along with his picking slip, walks up to the first machine, scans his ID card, and in the background, the VLM machine is taking that operator code, calling straight through to the data extraction layer and saying, give me a list of everything that's on his scanner currently that needs to be picked. That will drop down with the product that needs to be picked in the bin location, the quantity required. And then the machine essentially loops through that. Just need to turn that off. Drops through the list and pops out the necessary drawers. Some of the better machines actually stack the drawers. So if you give them the list of what you need to pick, they will actually prepare the next drawer behind the drawer that you're picking from, which makes it more efficient. So that's an example of one. Another one is cycle count drone. So we have a proof of concept at the moment where some guys have built a drone, and that drone can fly through your warehouse and scan the bin locations and scan the track ID labels on the physical pallets or boxes. So what they've actually done in that proof of concept is in their software, they ask the user which aisle they want to count. And then in the background, they call the data extraction tool. They say, this is the aisle, give me all the bin locations and detail for this aisle. Data extraction tool dumps out every bin location, what track IDs are in that bin location, and what the quantities of and products are in there. Then they fly their drone around and they come up with a list that says which bins are in sync and which ones aren't. So still proof of concept, but just an idea. Another one would be like a picking process update. So, but similar to what I talked about earlier, but I might have an online store. And on there, I've got a little tracking button. So the guy goes and looks at his order on his online store. He clicks on the button to say, give me an status update of my order. We just do this a different way around. Instead of pushing data up to the website, that button on the website would essentially call our data extraction tool and say, give me all the details about this picking slip, the status of it and where it is and what, you know, what's been picked, what hasn't been picked and so on, which I can now expose to the end user.
Okay, the next one we're going to have a look at is plugins. So we're going to show you a couple of, we're going to show you a couple of those. So I'm just going to hop into the software here. First of all, just to run through essentially what a plugin is, but to give it a bit of context, basically plugins are sections within the system that we need to customize or are highly customized based on the site that we're running or the process that is running. And some examples of these, I think, Anton, you want to run through a couple of these, but here are some of the examples of the plugins that can be configured.
Yeah, so maybe if I can just jump in there. What we found going from site to site to site, and the more complex the site is, the more the requirement is like for these kind of things, is we may have a standard process. Let's say the process is reviewing sales orders and allocating the inventory or reserving the inventory to it, releasing them out in groups or batches or waves into the warehouse. Those are standard processes. Every distribution center would review orders and release them out into the warehouse, right? But in those processes, the point at which we reserve the inventory would be very, very different from one site to another. So traditionally, we would write a reservation process for company A and then go to company B and we'd rewrite the reservation process and then go to company C, rewrite the reservation process. So that is where a plugin works really well. We replace that by saying, rather call out to a plugin, put all your logic in the plugin, which is then totally customizable by site. And there's numerous places in the software. I'll touch on some of the other areas in the software afterwards. But let's let Stephen just do a short demo here.
Okay, so the demo I'm going to do, we're going to use the one that Anton just spoke about, the sales order auto reservation, because it's probably the most common one that's used. So before I set the plugin up, I need to go and do a little bit of coding. So what we're going to do is hop across to Visual Studio. And what I've done is I've set up a simple plugin here for the sales orders, auto reservation. And what this plugin does from a logic perspective is it simply takes pack sizes from bulk and the remainder from pick face. So I've kept the example relatively simple, but we'll show you how it fits together. So first thing we need to do is obviously write all the code here. And then once we've got that, we build the solution, which gives us a little file here. It's a DLL file, which contains the logic. Okay, so we need to copy that over to the WMS server. And again, on the WMS server, there's a folder for plugins, which is empty at the moment. I'm going to pop that DLL in there. Okay, then we can go and set up our plugin within the system. I'm going to give it a name. And you can have, on the sales order reservation side, you can actually set up multiple plugins. So you could have 5 or 6 different custom plugins linked to different warehouses. And then you can run them that way. So we've got the name there, sales order reservation, save that. So you would have seen the name of the DLL that I've just copied into the folder is over there. So we're going to sales order release now. Sorry, before we do that, I'm skipping a step here. We need to go and configure that against the system setting or the warehouse setting. So those of you who know the system, we can obviously configure auto reservation rules at a system level or at a warehouse level. I'm just going to stick to the system level for now. And the rule itself, you will see here is demo, but also, as Anton was saying, in the past, we used to have these very static rules, which obviously still exist in the software, but they're very static and can't be changed because their code resides in the core product. Whereas this demo now is sitting in that DLL. So we'll save that. Okay, we're going to sales order. We can slip release here. When you open the screen, you also see at the bottom, it indicates the rule that we're running, and you can see it's currently a custom rule. So I'll just hit auto reserve there. Okay, that's gone and run the logic within that file. And the line's been green, and you'll see what's happened now is our pack size for this item is 5. So you see it's taken multiples of 5 out of the bulk bins, these 3 tracking IDs here, and the remainder out of pick face. But I think, Anton, we want to just touch on the inefficiency of this specific logic, and we'll make a change.
So here's a typical example where we want to change the logic, right? So the logic here is perfect in the sense that we said anything that's less than a carton, take it out of the pick face, and the carton size is 5. So the 3 is coming out of a pick face. Anything else that's a full carton we get from a bulk location. But if you look at that, we would be sending somebody to four different locations to pick that requirement. A more logical thing to do in a very simple environment would be to say, but hang on a second, when I look at that line to go and pick, what about me first starting by picking a full pallet? Could I pick a full pallet? If I could, rather go and pick the full pallet. So what Stephen's going to do now is going to take that logic and just adjust it, add a little bit of extra logic that says, first see if you can get a full pallet. If you can, take the full pallet. Then with what's left behind, take broken boxes out of a pick face and take full packs out of a bulk location. So let's have a look at that.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is quickly shoot back to the code here. And within my code, I've added a section in here earlier, which we can uncomment. And then I'm going to rebuild the file with this new bulk pallet logic in there. Sorry, full pallet logic. Again, just grabbing the file here. And this time we'll replace, obviously, what was there. So we'll replace this DLL. We can do this with the system running. We don't need to shut anything down or log out or log in. Okay, so once that's done, we can literally close this and hit the auto reserve again. And immediately that new logic is applied. And we can take a look at it now. It should have taken our stock from the full pallet first, which was 400. And then the remainder from that one, again, that's in pack sizes. And then the last little bits and pieces from the reserve quantity. So in this case, we're not breaking up pallets, and also we're not reserving from multiple pallets. But the concept we want to get across here is really you can put your logic into that little DLL, and it can be customized on the fly at any point, relatively easily, without even shutting down or getting your users out of the system.
Okay, so cool. So just to talk through some of the other areas where plugins are essentially apply. I mean, obviously there's reservation rules for inventory on sales jobs, on replenishment as well, where you may want to reserve differently for replenishment. There's the a plugin for splitting your picking slips. So you can build logic in to say, okay, how do I want to split the picking slips out into the warehouse? Do I want to break them up by area and have a separate picking slip by area? Do I want to break them up by material handling equipment? So I keep all the full pallets together, give that to a forklift driver, give all the full pack sizes to a man-up machine, and give all the remaining quantities less than pack size to a picker, and split up the picking slips that way. So there's another plugin for that. There's a plugin for LCT receipts. So if I'm doing an LCT receipt, I can import the packing lists from the supplier, which will sort of create the whole receipt, pre-create the receipt for me. Any integration to a scale. So wherever we integrate into a scale, obviously, if you go from one site to another, the scales, weigh scales are always slightly different. The interfaces are different. So we use a plugin to do the mapping. And then we've built the TMS system, which is a transport management solution. We're going to be demonstrating that in the next webinar. The TMS is a very intelligent module that manages the whole selection of carriers, the freight costs, the allocation of freight, and the optimization of freight, mainly used in North America. But essentially what that module does is it integrates out to a third-party freight solution, of which there's many available. We've integrated into ProShip ADSI, which is now known as Logistics. We've also interfaced into a product called Freight Pop. But you essentially could have another solution that manages your freight for you, and this module will allow you to integrate into any of those using these plugins. So the plugins allow you to add extra logic, do the mappings, and integrate into any other third-party software that you would particularly want. So that's where plugins fit in, very powerful.
Okay, the next one we're going to touch on, I'm not going to demo this item, we're just going to discuss it quickly, is our business objects. Probably about 3 years ago, we started introducing business objects into the software. And basically what business objects allow you to do is to build your own applications, or to build pieces into existing elements like triggers or VB scripting. So what you can do with business objects is call into existing logical sections of the software. So for example, you can do the creation of a bin, or you can do the reservation of a line. So in our plugins, we typically use business objects to do the reservation process. So that plugin I showed you earlier is using 2 business objects to go and do the reservations of the sales order lines. They're broken down into modules, function areas, and business, obviously the business object name. And this list here is just some of the ones that we've completed up until now. Anton, you want to touch anything there?
Yeah, I'm getting a few questions through, so I just want to make a note. We'll address the questions at the end. Okay. So yeah, let's just move on, Stephen, to the next slide. So I want to just give you an example where business objects really work fairly well. So let's say again an online store. That's a big one at the moment. So you would create yourself some sort of online store. The online store, a guy comes on there at 3 a.m. in the morning, he places an order, and we want that order to go directly into Syspro. Now you'd use the standard Syspro business object to go and do that. Syspro's got business objects for that. You can get a developer to write a little integration layer, takes an order straight at 3 a.m. in the morning, pops it into Syspro. But then you would use our business objects to do the next 2 steps, right? So the next step after that would be your application immediately goes and says, okay, cool. So the order's in Syspro now. Now I want to go to DATASCOPE and I want to fire off the sales order reservation process. So I'd actually reserve the product. And then immediately afterwards call another business object and say, release this out into the warehouse. So potentially somebody places an order at 3 a.m. in the morning on your website, your warehouse, it's released out onto the floor in your warehouse at literally a couple of seconds past 3 a.m. in the morning to start the picking process. So that kind of just shows some of the integration points. Other places where people use business objects in big factories where you're running 3 shifts and you've got receiving processes on all your machinery out in the factory, that can get very expensive because you're buying users for 3 different shifts, and you're also putting multiple receiving stations throughout the whole factory. So what a number of guys are doing is they're building their own receiving front end, and they're just using a business object on our side to process the job receipt directly back up into DATASCOPE, and DATASCOPE obviously pushes that back up into SysPro. So there's another one. And then just on this one, going back to the slide, you may then want to use the trigger at the bottom to do order status updates. It's not business object related, but here you could use a trigger then to push that back up to the online store. So just to give you an example where business objects would be used.
Okay, and the final one we're going to have a look at is our HTML5 mobile front end. And I think while I'm opening this up, Anton will just introduce it, and then we're going to have a look at the customization element of the HTML5 interface.
Yeah. So I think by now probably all of you are aware that that we typically used to use Windows mobile platform for all our scanning applications. About 4 years ago, Microsoft announced that they will not be continuing development on Windows mobile. So it's still supported, but it's end of life. There's no new functionality going in there. And the whole industry essentially moved across to Android. So from a hardware perspective, the big move has been into adjusting the hardware to run an Android platform. We obviously had to do the same. So we redeveloped all of the scanner-based applications into HTML5, but we took the opportunity to build them in a different form. What we had found is that when we were building in Windows, on the Windows platform, when you go from one site to the next site, people want different requirements. They want the screen to work differently. They want different questions to be asked. They want different validation. And what we were ending up doing is building that into that front end, the scanner-based front end, with more and more settings in the background. It's long, it's tedious. It has to go into a development life cycle or a development cycle. So what we did in building the HTML5 is we actually built a basic screen in every single case, and then built a really nice design kit that allows you to then open that screen in design mode and just go crazy, right? Add your extra logic, put in extra steps, whatever you like to do in those screens. And that's happening extensively on new sites. So for those companies that have been running DATASCOPE for a long time, I would encourage you to start moving across into HTML5. The site that we're busy with now is over 30 adjustments in the scanner screens for extra checks, extra balances, to do automation. So Stephen's got a very simple little example he's going to show you, but just see how easy you can take a screen and actually edit that screen to have an additional logic in it.
Cool. Thanks, Anton. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a flavor for it. So I'm not going to do anything too major, but basically what I'm going to do here is take our directed put away screen, and we're going to make a copy of the screen. So we're going to essentially copy it away and make a custom screen on that. So the first thing we need to do is to make a copy of it. So we click on this little button here at the top right, which lets us copy. We're going to give it a name, and we're going to copy that form. Okay, so what we've done now is we made an exact duplicate of the application. And immediately once you've done that, it'll appear in the custom menu on the bottom here. It'll also appear on the main tiles on the main screen that we saw earlier. The next step is to go into our application. And what we're going to do here for my example is I'm going to customize just some of the text on the screen. And in the directed put away, I'm going to customize it to have some logic around the palette. So if the palette is on hold, we're just going to direct that palette to a QC area. And if the palette is over a set mass, we're going to direct it to a heavy zone. And if it's just a straight normal palette, it's not on hold and it's not heavy, it'll work as the screen did before. So to do that, the first thing I want to do is customize the screen slightly. So we're going to go into design mode on the screen. And immediately when you do that, it allows you to actually go and edit the screen. So we're going to give this a name. I'll just call it demo. So you can put whatever text you want in there. And then for the purpose of this example, what we're going to do is add a little message just below the tracking ID that we can tell the user or warn the user in some red text that the palette is on hold and it needs to go to QC or it's a heavy palette. We'll also change the zone at the bottom here in those two cases. So to give them the message, we're going to need a little label in there. So what I'm going to do is add a row at the top and just move that down to where I need it. Okay, I'm going to put that just below the tracking ID. And then I'm going to put a little label in there. So we'll just add an element for the label. Okay. And that's all we're going to do in the designer for now. So I'm going to take it out of design mode, and then I'm going to save the screen. Okay, so those have been saved. So if I reopen that screen, obviously the look and feel has changed slightly. We've got a label in there, and we changed the text. So now what we want to do is put the logic in that's going to work within the screen. So we go here to what's called page markup. And what this gives you is gives you a view on both on the HTML markup as well as the JavaScript. Basically, that's just the HTML markup is what it looks like, and the JavaScript is the brains on what it does and how it works, the logic. So you'll see here, this element here is our label that we've added. So what I'm going to do is I've just got a snippet of code that I'm going to use there. And all I'm doing essentially is changing the label's name, and I'm making the text red. So I'm just going to copy that. Oh, let's get back in there, sorry. So we're going to change this text over here. This label, I'm essentially just replacing it very carefully. And we've made it red, and we've given it a name. And the reason we gave it a name is so we can reference that field in the JavaScript, which is the second change I'm going to make. So I'm going to scroll down here to the JavaScript. This is the location I'm going to put that in. And here's my JavaScript that we're going to add in. And all this JavaScript is doing, it's evaluating a couple of things. It's checking if the pallet's on hold, and it's setting out a warning message over there. And it's also setting the suggested zone. And then if it's a heavy pallet over 500 pounds or kilograms, it's setting it to heavy, and the zone is heavy. So we apply that. Okay, so we go back into the screen now. This is our screen we had before. If I put in a normal pallet, this pallet has got not heavy and it's not on hold. The screen works as before, and you would have seen the zone there is fast, and that's just the standard logic being applied. It's nothing that I've put in there. If I, however, put in a pallet that is on hold, you'll see we get a warning with the red text there saying, please take the track out of the QC area. And then also it's gone and overridden the standard logic, and it's put in the QC as the zone in the suggested zone there. And then similarly, if we put in this, our heavy logic will kick in, giving us a warning, and again, indicating that we need to take the pallet to a heavy zone. And obviously, the logic of the normal pallet still overrides all of that, and it goes back to what it was. So that's a very simple example of probably literally 10 lines of code, and we've customized that screen quite a bit.
So maybe if I can just jump in there then, some of the other ones that we've done for people and we're busy with, one of them is during a cycle count. We do not, at the moment, tell the user when he counts an incorrect quantity, right? So if somebody goes up to a bin with a cycle count, scans the bin, scans the pallet, counts 55 units, and we think it should be 60, we simply take the 55 in and we take it to your review screen, and somebody has to review that and accept or reject it. So in a case like that, what we're doing is putting some additional logic into the screen that basically says, on post, check the quantity against what the system thinks is there. If it's a match, just let him carry on. If it's not a match, pop a little pop-up that says, the quantity that you've counted does not match what the system says. You may want to recount this, right? We don't tell him what it is, of course, but it's just a small little pop-up that says you probably want to recount this particular bin. There's a typical example. Another one with customization is on the cycle count review screen. If you reject a count and say, I want to reject the count, want to automate the background through a trigger. The trigger says that count was rejected, calls a little application and puts that count, that bin, straight back into the scheduled cycle count. So what we're really doing here through triggers and plugins and HTML5 is we're giving you the tools, either yourselves or your partner, the tools to come and look at a business problem that you may have that you want to resolve, and you can actually resolve it yourself fairly easily, right? And that's the purpose of the whole selective architecture. All right, we have a number of questions, so if I can just spend a bit of time and address some of these. So somebody asked on the HTML5, looks great. When do you estimate that all scanner screens will be available in HTML5? All of them are currently available except for some of the very specific screens that were developed for the voice picking environment. So companies that are running voice picking and conveyor integration systems, there's some applications there that have not yet been converted, but pretty much everything else has been converted. Another question is, when we make changes using the toolkit, so this is obviously under HTML5, what will happen when we do customer upgrade? So if we go to a customer, or you as the customer upgrade to another version, what would happen to your customized screen? Stephen, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I think there's two things that we've done there. Well, the one we've done already, and the one is currently in development. Basically, we've got a verification tool that will first of all validate your JavaScript, so that if we've made changes to our SDK, in other words, the calls that the screen is using, we'll highlight those as potential problems within the screen. So there's a validator essentially that you can run prior to actually going to the version. You can run it and then check that your syntax or your parameters are all the same. And then second to that, what we're doing now is we're doing a comparison where you can compare your screens A to B. So in other words, it'll give you a code comparison of what has changed in the screen. In other words, what you have changed from the original screen, as well as what we have upgraded in the screen in the new version, allowing you to analyze what has been changed in there, and obviously either upgrade or leave the code as it is, so you can make those decisions. So we are trying to build some tools in to manage that.
Just to be clear, whenever you customize the screen, you're always taking the standard one and you're copying it away, renaming it, and you're customizing it. So the standard screen would upgrade with the software as normal. Your customized screen would reside off on the side. If you upgraded, it would not affect the base layer of the software, but the extra tool will allow you in the new version. So let's say you take the new version, you upgrade on a test company, you can take your customized screen, take the latest screen. So let's say that the one we used there was put away. So you can say, take the latest put away screen, take my customized put away screen, put the two together and show me any code differences between the two that may affect me. So that's how we're dealing with it on that side. Another question is just on where inside DATASCOPE can I set up pack sizes? So the number of units per carton, number of units per pallet, number of units per master pack, sub pack, etc. That's all done in under warehouse setup. There's a module underneath warehouse setup called barcode cross-reference. And within barcode cross-reference, you can take any stock code that you have, and you can set up as many pack size configurations as you like. You could have 10 different configurations with different quantities, and that's used in a number of different places throughout the software. Sometimes you have to select a different picking method to actually enact those quantities. So if you scan that barcode, we immediately know that that barcode is a pack of 6 or a pack of 24 or whatever the case is. Some of the other questions is, can we run a hybrid environment? In other words, if we're running Windows Mobile currently and we buy some HTML5 scanners, absolutely you can run them together. The software will continue to run, although they're independent platforms, they both transact through the same business layer in the background. We have a number of sites running like that currently, which really makes it very nice, because if you have, let's say you've got 30 or 50 Windows mobile scanners out there, and you replace 10 of them with HTML5 scanners, you can sort of run the one in and run the one out. So absolutely.
You also don't have to purchase any additional licenses or modules for it. It comes out the box.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe just to touch on that, that whole conversion of HTML5 is available to any existing client. We're not charging for that. The only thing we do charge for is the design kit. So to take like for like, if you simply take Windows and you start putting in HTML5, that is available in newer versions of the software, and there's no cost associated. If you want to take those HTML5 screens and actually add your own customizations into them, there is a design kit module that needs to be purchased to give you the facility to do that. All right, just having a look for any other questions here. Okay, this one is also asking the same thing. How would upgrades be affected? My current understanding is that we'll ignore, so over time we're going to, yeah, so over time, you know, new versions are going to get, you know, you've customized the screen. Over time, that screen is going to become more and more outdated. Right now, yes, that is true, but we are currently busy building that code comparison window. It should release, reasonably sure by the end of the year, but that will obviously allow you to go and double check your code. You will have to upgrade your screen, but all the logic is there, right? Much of the logic may not apply to you, so you may not need to do it, but we'll give you the tools to identify where those differences exist. And that is the end of the questions. I don't think there's any more at this point in time. So I want to thank you very much all for joining. We are running the next webinar on the 5th of November. So you will get some communication to register for that if you would like to. We will be running a webinar every single month for at least the next 6 months, and possibly for future, you know, possibly beyond that, but for now, for the next 6 months. And every one of these webinars will be recorded. We'll upload them to our website under webinars. So you can go and look at them again afterwards. Yeah, and then for those of you that are existing clients, feel free to drop me an email if there's specific webinars you would like to see, right? If you feel you would like a webinar on certain picking strategies or checkout strategies or whatever it is, drop me an email, suggest it to me. I can't promise anything, but obviously the purpose of these is to share as much knowledge as possible with the client base, so that your environment is as optimal as possible. Right. So thank you very much to everybody. I'm going to end the session now.